This is History Myths and Myth Conceptions. And today's myth conception is ancient nations and modern nationalism. This is a subject that will upset pretty much everybody. After all, most of us live in nation states, or in something comparable. The question of nation building and nationalism is incredibly complex. It includes contradicting opinions, and even the terminology is sometimes in a flux. Like the word race fell out of favor after the Second World War, and we don't hear things like the French race anymore. The words like ethnicity or people replaced it almost entirely in certain contexts. Also, the dictionaries can give quite different definitions of the word nation itself, sometimes even quite strange definitions. Every country has its national history, so people see direct links between their communities and comparable communities 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1000 years ago, and sometimes even 5000 years ago. The problem here is that as you travel into the past with your understanding of national identity, the more imaginary these direct links become. After all, nation is mostly a 19th century concept, although its origins can be traced to works of the 18th or possibly even 17th century. You obviously can also find comparable concepts in the ancient world, in Rome or in Greek city-states. Comparable, but not the same, obviously. National and cultural unity is a good thing, don't get me wrong, and unifying national mythology can give a strong sense of belonging. But if it is based on pretty much nothing or on wild imagination, it becomes incredibly problematic. It is nice to have a strong national identity, but let's be real, even in the end of the 19th century, when the idea of nation was already there, you could easily have a situation when a census in pretty much any European country could show you that a significant number of the population identified themselves as locals. No, seriously, locals. In the 19th century and sometimes in the early 20th century as well. Radio hasn't told them yet that they were in fact a part of some nation. And newspapers, well, literacy wasn't as widespread as it is today. And now we take this 19th century idea of national identity, we travel to the ancient world and we suddenly see glorious ancestors. Except frequently they are not your ancestors, or they are related indirectly. And they lived in a different country, and in a different society. They also spoke a different language, and they had a different religion. They are not a part of your community. In fact, many of them would probably be horrified that you think you are related to them. Imagine a dialogue of a modern Egyptian and an ancient Egyptian. Anthropology says that, contrary to a popular misconception, they are related, anthropologically. But that's about it. Culture, language, religion, everything is wildly different. National myths almost always contain absolutely hilarious and grotesque elements and have a ridiculous history of evolution. One of my favorite examples is the French, who started developing the concept of the nation earlier than the vast majority of other people, and at a certain period of time essentially dominated Europe culturally. But their earliest endeavors into the origins of the French people were absolutely fantastic. They decided to emulate Romans and declare that they were in fact descendants of the Trojans. Yes, Trojans. And eventually switched to Gauls, or Celts. But Romanized Gauls, since French is a Romance language and a descendant of Latin. The French actually had communities that spoke Celtic languages, and they still have them. And they routinely suppressed the use of these languages, which was an interesting exercise in nation building. I mean, we're mostly descendants of the Gauls, Vercingetorix is our hero, just like Asterix and Obelix, So let's discriminate all the languages of Gauls on the territory of France. Are Gauls and the modern French the same nation? No. Same people? No. Direct descendants? Not really. Almost everybody understands that it is a stretch and an attempt to make links to the past and find your origins. But it becomes a bit weird when it comes to Greeks. It becomes insane when you're dealing with the Chinese and Armenians. It becomes dangerous when you're talking about Jews. You suddenly have people who honestly believe that their communities exist for thousands of years and they are all essentially the same people, just dressed differently. They are not. There are no direct descendants of ancient pseudo-nations, only partial descendants of these people or partial descendants of the culture of the people from the distant past. Very distant past. Here I'd like to stress one quite obvious thing that usually goes unnoticed. 100 years is a long time. 1000 years is a horrific amount of time. We're just trained by history books to go like 500 years here, 2000 years there, like it is nothing. That's true, it is nothing for paleontology. But we're not talking about paleontology, obviously. So here's a quick chart of how you are related to your glorious ancestors in terms of biology. It is not the most important thing on the list. Your ancestry doesn't necessarily define your national identity, but it is one of the factors, together with culture, language, and so on. So, human biology. Here we go. Humans have 2 parents, and 4 grandparents, and 8 great-grandparents. If we travel 1000 years into the past, how many ancestors do we have? Well, let's count in a traditional fashion. That one generation is 30 years. So we need, say, 33 generations. Well, you take a calculator, you go through your nice and cozy binary tree, and you have over 8.5 billion ancestors. No, seriously, over 8.5 billion. After 50 generations, you exceed a nice number of quadrillion. So if you're trying to find if you're somehow related to Julius Caesar, not a descendant, but, related, and you decide to go something like 67, 68 generations back, well, you'll find that indeed you are related to pretty much anybody you want, with some minor exceptions probably. Obviously, even if, on paper, your tree of ancestors grows exponentially and quickly reaches impossible numbers, that doesn't mean you have an impossible number of ancestors. First of all, some ancestors might pop up here and there more than once, so the total number will be reduced. That's called pedigree collapse. Second, even though there's no such thing like a pure-blooded representative of some ethnic group, because human communities always intermix with each other to some degree, they usually, but not always, mostly intermix within a certain area, with their neighbors, so to speak. So the overall melting pot is quite big, but not huge. And there are some isolated communities, but that's mostly an exception from the general rule, like Tasmanians. So, once again, anthropology is important. And yes, certain modern communities are obviously more related to certain ancient communities than the others, anthropologically, genetically. But it is easy to cross the line when it all becomes pure insanity and a mathematical horror. People do it all the time. Seriously, there's a comment section under my video about Septimius Severus, where you can read some interesting ideas that a person should be considered black if he had at least one black ancestor 26 generations back. So yeah, people are counting drops of blood in this insane form of blood homeopathy. As we mentioned before, the other important building blocks of a nation and an important component for tracing your lineage are culture, which includes traditions, and language. Also, sometimes religion is important. At least it used to be important not so long ago. Personally, I fully understand and probably even encourage establishing a cultural link to classical antiquity. That's a separate subject, but in short, classical antiquity in many ways can be considered the foundation of human civilization, regardless of your ancestry. That said, you can quickly turn this idea into something quite stupid, because pretty much everybody can agree with the example of ancient Egyptians and modern Egyptians. Anthropological link is there, cultural, linguistic, and religious, not really. But what about other ancient people and their modern, so to speak, counterparts? Well, the situation is usually analogous. Try to compare the culture, language, and religion of modern Greeks and ancient Hellenes. The link is obviously there. But that's about it. Modern Greeks usually, with some minor exceptions, speak a distant descendant of the Attic Greek, even people who live in historically Doric regions. And all Doric dialects are extinct except for the Tzakonian dialect spoken by a couple of thousand people. The culture is obviously seriously different. Religion? Well, the majority of modern Greeks are Christians. And I know it's gonna sound very controversial, but claiming your cultural link with antiquity and being a Christian is a little bit like being a Jew and a member of the National Socialist German Workers' Party at the same time. It is possible, but there are certain contradictions that make this position questionable. Don't get me wrong, this is not an attack on modern Greeks, who are generally wonderful people, and not an attempt to say that they are in fact not Greeks. This is a discussion of time traveling with 19th century concepts into the distant past. And you can take any other nation as an example. It works pretty much the same way, always. But it doesn't stop people from believing in nonsense like our nation is the most ancient nation of the world. We have 5,000 years of history. We invented everything, and you should give us your territory because our ancient religious texts say so. So yes, there is a thin line between your cultural heritage and delusions, sometimes malignant and dangerous delusions.